History Gems. Now, it's fair to say there are thousands, maybe millions of events in human history that have become forgotten. They may have been important, but they're just not remembered. But I think it is far more dangerous when you get an event which people think they know, and it turns out that the popular understanding of that particular event isn't what actually happened. The best example is World War I.
If you were to play word association with World War I, probably the first word that would pop into your head is trenches, rapidly followed by mud, and then probably gas. And if you were to ask the strategy of the generals, you'd say they didn't have any, they were idiots. But the reality was, World War I saw more developments and new ideas in military warfare than had been seen for generations, centuries even. Let's take the tank, for example. That was invented to try and get over the trenches. Air warfare, that was new too. But of course the most insidious weapon is gas. Gas, of course, has been put in poems, but the reality was less than 1% of the deaths in World War I were from gas. Indeed, if you were unlucky enough to have inhaled mustard gas, only 2% of those who inhaled it died. Indeed, 70% of the soldiers who were victims of gas attacks were fighting fit again 6 weeks later.
Now let me be clear. I'm not saying World War I wasn't important. It was hugely important to global history. And I'm certainly not saying that millions of people didn't die. They did. But there's been this swirling later opinion that has distorted what actually happened. And I'm not saying I'm the first person to come up with this. People like, for example, Gary Sheffield in Forgotten Victory, and there are numerous other books that basically debunk the myths of World War I. But let's be honest now, most people aren't going to be reading those books, but you should. Gary Sheffield is particularly good, all right? However, let's take, for example, the trenches. If there's one thing that people associate with World War I, it's the trenches. And I remember as a child having to read all that World War I poetry and thinking, oh my goodness, how did these people live year after year in these trenches under constant bombardment, under gas attack, etc. I couldn't do that, but you know what? Nor could they. This may surprise you, but the amount of time frontline soldiers spent in the trenches was between 7 and 10 days. The generals weren't fools. They knew that their soldiers would get worn out, so that they were rotated regularly. And indeed, these moments of extreme bombardment were a few days, maybe a few weeks at most, but it wasn't what a soldier at the front line would experience most of the time that they were there.
The trenches weren't the full story of World War I anyway. This is a photo of a Zeppelin, and indeed there was a kind of proto-blitz over London during the war. This photo was taken in Mesopotamia, modern-day Iraq, showing and reminding you that, of course, the war was genuinely a world war. However, it's the body count that seems to be the main issue. 10 million died in World War I, but 60 million died in World War II. Does that make it 6 times worse? And at the end of World War I, there was Spanish flu. This is a photo of that particular virus, and that killed 100 million people.
Why am I doing this now? Well, let's be honest, it's going to be the centenary anniversary as of summer 2014, okay? So I'm getting in early. But I want to put out a warning there. While I'm sure a lot of the documentaries, films, dramas, t-shirts, I don't know, there's going to be a lot of stuff about World War I over the next few years, and I'm sure lots of it will be high quality, and I'm sure lots of it will be pointing out these myths. However, because people think they know this story, might mean that a lot of people will miss it, and these myths will continue and perpetuate. And that's important. I hope that you've watched this, I hope that you share this, so that a few of these myths can be debunked, and people can get a better understanding of what really happened to those soldiers between 1914 and 1918. Thank you for watching.
If you like this, you can find out History Gems on Facebook and on Twitter. See you soon.